Great pleasure. I met this gentleman in Palm Springs. I believe that he carries a message that we need to hear. And without any further interruption, I want to give you Adam T.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. My name's Adam. I am an addict. Want to first thank the committee for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Narcotics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Welcome to the people that are new. You know, if you're trying NA again, if you don't want to be here tonight, if you don't think this will work for you. I didn't get to Narcotics Anonymous because I had a bad weekend. You know, I had a couple of bad decades, right? And for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. I mean, every meeting has their perpetual newcomer. You see that, you know, that lost soul taking chip after chip. And that was me. I stood up in NA for 17 years. It became ridiculous. I mean, I had so many chips and key tags, I could have played poker with them. It was horrible. I mean, I remember one secretary saying, "Give them back." And I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. So if you're new, you know, we understand. Everyone has been a newcomer here. Even though you look at all of this time, remember that. And, you know, what I would do as a newcomer is I would go into your head and look back at myself with judgment and think, gosh, what a loser. Why can't you get this? What's wrong with you? And I know the old timers were judging me, you know. If you're new, we're judging. I mean, my home group makes bets. I love it when they say, don't judge anybody. You ever hear that? Don't judge anybody in recovery? And then what do they tell you 5 minutes later? Stick with the winners. That's not confusing, right? I mean, you hear a lot of contradictions in the rooms. I remember sitting in my counselor's office. I'm in detox, you know, and I'm pretty much dope sick, and I'm sitting across his table, and he looks at me and he says, "Now, don't make any major changes in your first year." Right? So I come to a meeting, I get a sponsor. What's the first thing he tells me? You got to change everything. Right? Don't make any major decisions in your first year. Anybody seen The Third Step? Right? How about don't get in a relationship in your first year? No one knows if that works. No one's ever done it. I could always see the people that aren't laughing, right? There's always a saint in the crowd. If you got a halo, don't let it choke you. But the one I love is God doesn't give us more than we can handle. If God didn't give me more than I could handle, I wouldn't need God's help. Right? Think about that. And the longer I've been clean, the longer I've been separated from narcotics, the more I've had to come to terms that I absolutely, desperately need God's help. If you're new, I need your help. Help is the dirtiest four-letter word in recovery. And the hardest thing for me to do as an addict is to relinquish control, to say I can't do this. And Narcotics Anonymous has done for me what I could never do for myself. It's done for us as a fellowship and as a society, as a community, what many of us could never do. And if I live to be 100 years old, I could never, ever, ever pay Narcotics Anonymous back for the love and the kindness that you people have shown me. And I will never forget that. You know, I don't want to rat my friend out, but I was just mumbling in the back. I need a coffee. He's like, boom, Starbucks. I mean, everyone has been so kind to me. You know, you guys have been so helpful. And I could never thank you for the hospitality, even tonight. You know, if you're new, we do this every night. That may not be true, but I guarantee you this will ruin your using. You'll be thinking about us dancing and doing the countdown, you know, when you're behind the dumpster getting high. Maybe those people were right. So eventually I started coming to meetings loaded. Now, the interesting thing about Narcotics Anonymous 2017, you see an addict loaded in the rooms these days, people say stuff like, oh my gosh, what's he doing here? I mean, I don't want to bash the therapeutic community, but because of this thing called treatment, you don't see a lot of people loaded in the rooms anymore. And, treatment is now a $35 billion a year industry, right? That's kind of grown up about Narcotics Anonymous, that swoops us up in our most desperate moments, throws us into yoga class. Right? Craft hour. I'm making like belt buckles and bongs, right? Nature walks. What I'd do is I'd go to the methadone clinic, I'd get my dose, I'd go to the liquor store, get a 40, and I'd cruise into the noon NA meeting. Do some of my best sharing. Now, I know there's a lot of young people here. I'll tell you right now, 30 years ago, there were not a lot of young people in Narcotics Anonymous. And the old timers would say stuff like, you know what, we spilled more than you used. And we're like, you know what, Pops, we didn't spill any. That's why we got here sooner. But for 17 years, I recycled through the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. By the time I finally got clean, I'd gone through residential treatment for drug addiction 28 times. I know, not 28 days like the movie. This isn't Hollywood. 28 consecutive times. And I wore that like a badge of honor. I thought, that's what makes me an addict. And I remember telling my sponsor, hey, I went through treatment 28 times. I was hoping that would get rid of the guy. Loser. He was overzealous. Go find someone that's willing. Ruin his batting average, right? And I remember him looking at me and saying, going through treatment 28 times, that doesn't make you an addict. I thought, you're kidding. He says, oh, no. No, it means you paid $500,000 for our basic text. And I didn't think that was funny either. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run, but treatment never solved the problem. And as an addict, like so many of us, I always thought the problem was narcotics. I'd been hearing that since 8th grade. Why do you use so much? Why are you always loaded in class? Why don't you just stop? I always thought the problem was drugs. And I remember someone in NA saying to me, Adam, if narcotics is your problem, that bindle, that pipa, that syringe, that balloon, that bottle of pills, if that's your problem, you're probably not an addict. And then in the very next breath, he says to me, if you are in fact an addict, the type that's described in our literature, your problem isn't narcotics. And I remember thinking, what? It took me another decade to understand what he was trying to tell me. It was like some kind of cruel riddle. I used over that for years. But when I got around a group of people that really understood the disease of addiction, and they turned some of the statements in the literature into questions and directed them at me, I started to see the truth about addiction. And one of those truths I saw is that I was never able to live with narcotics. Even as a teenager, I was pissing in my pants, I was drooling on my desk, I was passed out under the bleachers. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom. Right? People are picking high schools, I'm picking rehabs. Most likely to overdose. It's a nice thing to put in your yearbook, right? And I always thought the problem was narcotics. And what I've come to understand is the greater aspect of the disease of addiction is that an addict of my type cannot live without drugs. And part of what it means for me to be an addict, if I'm really honest about my relationship with narcotics, is that I have a mind that will continue to take me back to getting loaded. Every time I get released from a treatment center, an emergency room, a hospital, I'm sitting in LA County Jail, 47325, roll it up. I'm like loaded. I'm puking my guts out before I get the pipe. I don't even stop for my property. And once I make a decision to use, it's over for me. I am already in a place where I become physically overwhelmed by the disease of addiction before I've even taken that first one. So part of what it means for me to be an addict is that I have a mind that continues to take me back to getting loaded. It's almost like my default mode, like on a computer. And it's very interesting because I was talking to some people about the language that we use, like program and recovery. And, this guy was a computer programmer, and he was telling me one of the definitions of a program, if you look it up in the dictionary, think about it, is a sequential set of instructions that brings about a result. Now, what do you do when you get a corrupt file on a computer? Listen to the language. Oh, you put in a recovery disk. And what's its function? It restores it to an earlier point in the process. Second step, right? Then he tells me that steps 10 and 11 are like the viral scan. Now, I didn't know what he was talking about. It went right over my head. You know why? Because I'd confused the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous with the program. And although they are equally important, they are not always the same thing. When we say principles before personalities, program before fellowship. See, the fellowship gives me enthusiasm. It gives me inspiration, right? It gives me encouragement. It gives me hope, right? Brotherly love, compassion, sympathy. Some people even get relationships and employment here, right? But you put an addict of my type into a large group of happy people like this, and I become sicker in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. I become more separate, more different, and more alone. And what does that mean? It means separated from God. It means different than every single person in this room. That's what we call terminal uniqueness. And alone, that ache in the heart of every addict that has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people. It has to do with my inability to connect. And you put a bag of dope in me, I'm calling people from 5th grade saying, I love you. I go right into amends. If you're laughing, you're relating. And what that means is when I'm loaded, I am at one with God. I am connected to every soul here, and I am at peace with self. And unless I can find that sense of peace and connection through the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, an addict like me will never stay here. An addict like me will never stay here. And when I look back at 17 years of failure, even in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, what I see today in my life is my defiance towards spiritual principles. Now, we talk about denial. And it's not denial about the problem, right? Most of us don't have to think twice about whether or not we're addicts, right? We read it every day. That's not what stops an addict like me from recovering. It's denial about the solution. That these time-tested steps, this plan of action, this roadmap to spiritual success isn't going to work for an addict like me. And you know why I think that? Because it wasn't my idea. But if you're new, look at this room. This is the biggest thing happening around here tonight. I mean, dope dealers must hate us. We're stealing all their business. This is God's war on drugs. So I start to understand that defiance towards spiritual principles, that it is in my nature. I will argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me it's big, I'll tell you it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. Right, and then I'll blame you for eternity. That's why we say denial is an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Think about it. You can tell an addict, you can't tell them much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven, right? So an addict like me has to get to recovery eventually on my own terms. Not because mommy wants me to, not because sober living wants me to, not because the judicial system or the parole department, but for an addict like me, it's only because and when I've burned my life to the ground. Because hope doesn't matter to me until I'm hopeless. You think hope matters to me when I got a couple $100,000 in the bank, a brand new Harley, and a hot girlfriend? You think I need hope? Please. Think about it. And God doesn't matter to someone like me until my back's against the wall. Right? If you've ever been on one of those gurneys being jump-started with the paddles and you got paramedics all around you, all you know is God. Right? When I'm puking my guts out every morning, right, with the dry heaves, dope sick, trying to get well, who prays more than an addict? Come on, please. I get a couple days clean and you got to write all this elaborate literature to try to convince me there's a power in the universe other than me? Isn't that the God complex I live with? These four qualities: grandiose, sensitive, immature, and omnipotent. That's what I have, and those are my finer qualities. And if you really think about what they mean, anything that feeds that grandiosity or conflicts with that sensitivity, attacks it, or that immaturity, like I have to grow up. They say the worst 2 years for an addict are the last year getting loaded because I got to hit bottom, and the first year clean because I got to grow up. And this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'll tell you, if you're new, when I first got clean, I wanted to change everything about Narcotics Anonymous. We have home groups, like, where we get these people that come into our home group, right, brand new. They want to change the format, the way we run the literature. You know what I mean? 30 days later, we never see them again. And the longer I've been clean, the more I want to keep Narcotics Anonymous exactly the way it is. Because it ensures our survival. It protects us from, like we read in every meeting, the internal and external forces that could destroy us. How critical and well written that piece of literature is. And as I grew in recovery, I started to see how that applies to a relationship. That our common welfare will come first. Our love and our relationship depend on our unity. And for our relationship's purpose, there is but one loving God that guides us. And we have a desire to stay together, and so forth and so on. And all of a sudden, all of this stuff makes so much sense. What if it was really possible that all of this could turn out to be the place where we have an amazing life? This change, this little bit of change. That all that pain and all that suffering I had turned into the catalyst that brought me to a place where I was taken almost like from this scrap heap to a better life than I could have ever dreamed of. Could that really be possible? Well, ask some of the old timers. You don't believe in life after death? Look around Narcotics Anonymous. You're looking at it. So I start to look at what happened to me. And what happened to me, by the way, thank God we don't look like our stories, right? I got to one more treatment center. I was 120 pounds. I'd been on methadone maintenance for 10 years. I had tracks from my wrist to my neck. You know what I mean? And I'm dying. I stink like urine. My fingers are dirty. I'm missing teeth. I mean, this is the way I come in. Right? And I'm in my nightgown with my ass hanging out in detox, thinking I got it going on, right? Because I know they got methadone. I mean, we're the only people that can actually be on the curb and look down at the world. Right? I'm judging the speaker, right? I got two speeds, grandiose and comatose. And I'm strutting around the detox bragging about robbing Brinks trucks. I finally do my fourth step. It was a bread truck. And it was empty. Grandiose. So I'm sitting there with my fellow associates in the detox, and this woman comes in on her H&I panel doing her talk. If you don't know what H&I is, it's a committee of Narcotics Anonymous that brings meetings into prisons, detoxes, treatment centers, hospitals, anywhere where clients, patients, or inmates can't get to meetings. H&I probably has the lowest relapse rate in all of recovery. The cohesiveness that I've seen over the years in H&I is unbelievable. It is our first point. Right. It is our first point of contact with new people. If you're new, you can get involved with H&I right away. You could come and watch how it goes on. You can go to a meeting. You can go through that whole process, and a lot of that changed my life. So this woman's on her H&I panel. She's doing her talk. At the end of her talk, she looks us all up and down, and she says, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. And I looked at her, and I looked at the guy next to me, and I said, what a bitch. Because I didn't understand. And then she said something that would later change my life. She said, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And all of these years later, I understand that that journey to recovery, just like that journey to surrender that each and every addict has to walk, is personal. If you're new, we cannot give you the gift of desperation. We can't give it to you. This thing about fun with problems, just problems. I mean, it's really hard to get clean in the fun with problem stage, right? 16 years old, sitting in a hot tub with 2 supermodels and an 8-ball of cocaine, and your dad sends you to rehab. You're like, really? We know why you're not happy. We talk about my worst day clean's better than my best day using. I'm like, really? But my worst day clean's better than my last day, my last 5 years using. Then I start to get some perspective on the progression of the disease of addiction, where the disease kills me every day and it won't bury me. Remember what that looks like. Right. That gift of desperation is a great acronym for God. But for me as an addict, I had to get to a place in my life where my head couldn't get enough and my body couldn't take any more. Remember what that looks like when I'm knocking on death's door, right? Waking up or coming to with a pipe in my hand, with a bag of dope still. My head can't get enough. My body can't take any more. I'm calling a dope man saying the dope ain't no good and someone just fell out on my cotton, right? Then God means something totally different. It means grow or die. Then I got 2 choices. Go on to the bitter end, right? We talk about jails, institutions of death, or find a new way to live. I mean, if you were to do a survey at Walmart, jails, institutions of death, new way to live. It's like a no-brainer. You step over to, county jail, you go, my cell, ask me that question. I'm thinking, really? Can I talk to you Monday? This is called delusion. The lies I tell myself. How I rationalize, justify, and minimize that first hit. That will kill me. The lie is dead. And I need to go back through my using history. I need to look at that. To walk through that with a sponsee. Is there a lurking reservation? That idea. If I think I can still have a great life and get loaded, there's no way I'm going to be able to sit here. These seats they won't fit right. They just won't fit right. And I don't want to offend anybody, especially the new people, but imagine throwing someone a life raft and they look at the life raft and they say, I was looking for a blue one. I don't like the way you threw it. How do you work with a guy like that? I mean, you're going to fight on every turn. And this time when I got clean, I said yes to everything. And no one could give me that. We say surrender or be dragged. Someone gave me a coin and said the greatest battle in a man's life is not against his brother or sister. It is against himself. So then the question is, if you're new, what am I fighting? Is this an external war or an internal war? We talk about the external unmanageability, and we talk about the internal unmanageability. And then I start to understand that it's completely different. That I must find a power. That in and of myself, I cannot solve this problem. By the way, if you're new, we're the only people that actually want a reward because we ran out of a burning building. Right? I mean, if you're feeling heroic because you gave up your big Saturday night in Yuma to hang out with us, this is the only place on God's earth where they'll actually applaud because you came in to save your own life. Right? I mean, you're sitting here tonight thinking about getting loaded? That beats the hell out of being in a dope house right now thinking about getting clean. I was told there's 3 prayers in this life. One is God help me, right? No one says it more than an addict. God help me. The second prayer in life, God give me greatest distraction on earth. But the prayer I'd never said was God use me. And I end up in Yuma. Like poof. And absolutely 100% in love with Narcotics Anonymous. I never, ever, ever thought I would say that. People say I'm a grateful addict. I wanted to puke when I heard that because I didn't understand that it was the war within me that was blocking me from an amazing life. That there were some old ideas that I had to see. And I can write an autobiography for a 4-step. The only problem with that, my sponsor said, is you already know your story. I had to look at some very, very critical ideas. Out of the flat book on page 100, it talks about selfishness, an attitude that I can do whatever I want and not pay the consequences. Delusion, the lies I tell myself. The resentments which I hang on to. And this fear that is in every area of my life. And eventually I had to start to look at that. My sponsor said, I want you to buy a black suit when I got clean. And I said, why? And he said, well, if you stick around Narcotics Anonymous, unfortunately, you're going to go to a lot of funerals. It'll come in handy. And he was serious, right? Then he started laughing. He goes, oh, and by the way, if you get loaded again, at least we'll have something nice to bury you in. See, if you baby the addict, you'll bury him. I need to hear the truth about the disease of addiction. It is fatal. It is progressive. It is chronic. It's like being on a train. The train goes to one place. It goes to jails, institutions of death. That's the only place the train goes. You know, I get a couple of days clean. I feel safe and protected. I'm at a convention. I got some coffee. I got a hot girlfriend. I'm in a hotel room. I think the heat's off. But see, for me, that powerless doesn't mean I can't get loaded. It absolutely means I will get loaded again. That all of my life I was one decision away from using. And today, between me and that decision, there's a whole world called recovery. It's about people like you. It's about rooms like this. It's about the principles of Narcotics Anonymous. It's about this mystery we call God. If God scares you, tough. Let it be direction. Let it be good, orderly, whatever you want to call it. And that's what I had to look at. I had to set aside some old ideas. And if you were to take the 3 relationships in my life, my relationship with God, plus my relationship with self, plus my relationship with others, and you were to put it on a blackboard, you know what it would equal? Detox. Yet I couldn't let go. And I was asked to set aside everything I thought I knew about God, about the 12 steps, about Narcotics Anonymous, so I could have a new experience. It's a big deal to ask somebody to do that. Someone said, you go to the ocean with a thimble, you get a thimble full of ocean. You go with it all. When I became hopeless and I wasn't hanging on to anything, my life became so different. You know, I never thought I had understood. A really old story in recovery about this guy, and I'm just going to take a chance and talk about it. This guy's walking down this street, and he's crying because he wants to be clean. You know, on that last day, getting loaded. I'll do anything to get loaded. God, please help me get clean. I'll do anything not to get loaded again. So he's walking down the street saying his prayer. God shows up on the middle of the street. You'll do anything to be clean? Really? He says, anything. He says, well, how much money you got? He goes, well, I get $50. God says, well, give me the $50. You can be clean. He gives him the $50. The guy's still unhappy. He's crying. He says, why are you crying? He says, well, if I give you my $50, I won't have gas for my car. God says, you have a car? You said you'd do anything, right? Give up the car. Now he's really sobbing. He goes, if I give you the car, I won't be able to get to my job. God goes, you have a job? You have to give up the car, the job, and the keys, the whole thing, and the $50. Now he's really crying. He goes, well, if I lose my job, I'll lose my house. God's like, you have a house too? And then he tells him about his family, and he's like just devastated. And he's like crying, saying, I have nothing. And God throws him the keys back. See, that ain't your car, it's my car, but you get to drive it. That house was never your house. It's my house. You've just been living in it. And those family, those kids, those are really my kids. You just get to take care of them. And all of a sudden, it all made sense. What am I really giving up if I'm new? To try a new way of life. What am I really giving up? That's the question. You know, people ask me, we talk about, the theme of this recovery. It's like, people say, why do you keep going to meetings? I'm like, why do you keep going to the gas station? Right? The shower I took yesterday won't keep me clean today. It means I can't stay clean on yesterday's recovery. You unplug a refrigerator, what happens? Everything goes bad, right? Does it matter if it's 20 days, 20 months, or 20 years? No. My sponsor said the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous are really like the face of a clock. And when you're in 12, you better be in one with a newcomer. Because it's right next to one. And the reason the grass is greener over there, you know why it's greener? Because they're watering it. And what I didn't understand is by reaching back in my community and helping another addict, I would re-experience addiction in a completely different way. I would re-experience that obsession in a way where I could actually be helpful. There's 2 days in a person's life significant. The day a person is born, the day he finds out why. And I never understood that could be about staying clean and helping another addict to achieve recovery. I never knew how significant that could be. That some guy would get out of county jail and ask me to help him out, and I'm like, I really don't want to help him out, right? So he keeps bugging me. So I sit at coffee with him. I take him through the steps. Then it's like he wants a girlfriend. Then it's like, he's looking for a job. Then I'm the best man at his wedding. Then I'm the godfather of his son. Then I have the keys to his house. Then I'm part of his family. Who would have ever thought that would happen as a result of one little thing? That how could you ever buy that? That those kind of priceless relationships that we establish through recovery. And it might be 100 people you go through before that event happens. I give out 100 cards like I get one guy to a fifth step if I'm lucky, right? And it isn't really me anyway. It's just me trying to pass on the recovery message. That any addict can recover. Now, I do a lot of H&I. I should, right? I'm an alumni from everywhere. And I just want to talk about that because, I know there's a military base here, and I've had a panel at the VA for a lot of years. In West LA, we have a big Veterans Administration, and we come into, these groups, and it's like a room full of soldiers, right? And they ask us, pick a topic. And I'm a smartass. Room full of soldiers, I'm picking the topic, so I pick surrender. Room gets dead quiet, especially Marines. But if you ever watch a soldier surrender, like in a theater of combat, the illustration's perfect. You'll see the soldier take the rifle, very slowly lay it on the ground, sit down on the side of the road, wait for someone to tell him what to do, right? I mean, when you got 40 AK-47s pointed at your head, you don't throw down the gun with an attitude. No offense to the court card people. Right? I mean, come on now. You're not sitting on the side of the road looking back at the gun, because if you do, someone's going to shoot you, right? Am I looking back at the pipa? Am I looking back at that syringe? Am I looking back at the balloon? Am I looking back at that bag? If you're new, it's like I'm in the high school gym 20 years later. The band's gone, the girls are gone, the lights are out, and I'm in this empty, dark room saying, where's the party? There's no disco ball in the dope house. See, that's the euphoric recall. That is the lie. That is the reservation. That life has its moments, and for those moments, an addict like me will give my life to recapture and recreate the magic that I once found in narcotics. That's the lie. And that lie will kill me. It's a ghost. And if you're like me, fear won't keep me clean. I don't know about you guys, but, getting a third strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing my big career, throwing away my education. Did scared straight work for you? Went right over my head. Now, you guys know what a recreational user is? The weekend warrior? The guy that breaks the pipe Sunday night? I'm like, Monday morning, I'm like, bro, you going to push that? I mean, you get a weekend warrior and a real addict in a holding tank, like a jail cell for driving under the influence. You got two completely different philosophies going on. You got the weekend warrior over here on one side of the cell thinking, man, why'd I get so loaded last night? I knew I shouldn't have used so much. Real addicts on the other side of the cell thinking, why'd I take the 8? See, now the court car people never laugh at that either. That shit ain't funny, right? Should have stayed on Surface Street. You could have been home cleaning your pipe tonight. Recreational users, old lady says, if you don't get clean, I'm leaving you. Recreational user cleans up his act, doesn't use in the house, gets a little Visine. Now, if my woman says, if you don't get clean, I'm leaving you, you know what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about single life. I mean, come on, you want to see drama? Get between a dope fiend and a pipe, right? I mean, narcotics was the love of my life. It had me from hello. It completed me. You think I'm going to let go of the love of my life without a fight? I can't even let go of a bad relationship. Everything I let go of has claw marks all over it. And if you're new, my relationship with Narcotics Anonymous today is the same. If anything gets in the way of recovery for this addict, it's out of my life. A woman, I don't care how beautiful she is, how much she loves me, how great she makes me look. I remember the first time I said that in a meeting, there she was in the back of the room. She's like, baby, you don't look like an addict. Oh my gosh, why do you got to go to all those meetings? Oh, you're not speaking again, are you, honey? Then she tells me, that NA program, it's getting in the way of our relationship. So a couple months later, we're still hanging. Now it's getting a little heavier. It's the big night. You know the big night, right? Meet the parents night. So she gets me a suit and tie, takes me over to her parents' house, puts me at the head of the table. Out comes the exotic wine. She's like, honey, you can have one glass of wine. Oh, please. Please. It's just a glass of wine, sweetheart. It's a toast. It's natural wine. 4 more rehabs. Oh, yeah, I stole her purse that night. Yeah. Alcohol is a drug. Hey, you don't believe it? If you're new, next time you have a beer, take a look in that beer. I guarantee there'll be a rock down there. Hard-won experience. And like I said, she came to detox with a get well card. I think I got 4 cards from that one. I know I don't want to offend anybody, but she qualified for another program. I tried to send her to Codependence Anonymous. She wouldn't go. You know why? She didn't have anyone to go with. I know, I'm walking across thin ice here. I could always tell the Nar-Anons in the group. They don't think any of this is funny. They can't stand to see us have a good time even here. Oh. So, I get out of rehab, right? I come from a long line of suicide, mental illness, and addiction. My mother's brother committed suicide loaded. My father's brother committed suicide loaded, okay? I'm getting out of rehab, and they're like, what, are you better than us now because you don't get loaded? And I learned these principles, that this is a systemic family disease. I understand now the principles of Nar-Anon, that I have to see the big picture. The real problem, you know what the problem with Narcotics Anonymous is? The real problem? It's full of addicts. So eventually I have to learn how to be successful and peaceful in a dysfunctional relationship, right? Think about it. If people have to change for me to be happy, what kind of life am I going to have? So now how do I learn to mind my own business and have some business to mind? To understand how to separate the fact that I didn't cause it, I can't control it, I can't cure it. And then I start to understand how important it is to establish these principles in relationships. Because if my significant other understands Nar-Anon and understands these steps and principles, there's a better chance that we'll stay together, right? We have a joke in that fellowship. You know how many Nar-Anons it takes to screw in a light bulb? None! The Nar-Anon detaches and lets it screw itself. I have sponsees that pay more in taxes than I earn all year. They have these huge careers and these little tiny programs. And I've never seen one of them stand the test of time here. What do I do for a living? I stay clean. Oh, what do I do for money? That's over there. I get those two things mixed up, I'm back in handcuffs. I get those two things mixed up, I'm back in an emergency room. Or I get a double header. I'm handcuffed to a gurney in an emergency room. Right? With a cop trying to get a balloon out of my mouth. I'm like, I swallowed it. If you're new, puke smells the same in a Mercedes. And it will take years for me to understand that I cannot solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution. That is the rub. That is the dilemma that I'm up against as an addict. Self-knowledge won't fix me. I've had every relapse prevention class known to man. You know, I'm behind a dumpster on Skid Row again with a syringe trying to get loaded, and the bum next to me is like, give me that syringe. And I'm crying because I can't get back here because I got a head full of Narcotics Anonymous, I got a bag full of dope, and I'm separate, different, and alone one more time. And if you think that sounds painful, you know what could be worse than that? Being in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, being a real addict and not working the 12 steps. It could be almost more painful. Coming to meetings late, leaving early, not having a sponsor, not having commitments, not being of service. There's no anesthetic. It could be more painful to be in that situation. Being in a 12-step program and not working the 12 steps is kind of like staying in a 5-star hotel and sleeping in the bathroom. And I never knew how free I could be. Someone told me this years ago, and now I understand it. The disease of addiction is the only disease, when treated, that will actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if they never had the disease. I could have never believed that. Until someone sat me down and took me through a very specific spiritual process of surrender, catharsis, restitution, and service. And as I went through that process, for the first time, I started to get free. And my sponsor said, how free do you want to be? You want to be free enough to just survive? So when people say, how you doing? You can say, I'm hanging in there. Or do you want to be free enough to chase your dreams, to have relationships that work? To be rid of the things in you that are actually blocking you. It was suggested to me that the 10th step, the continuation of inventory, was kind of like going to an ATM machine. I said, what do you mean? And he said, you know, when you go to the ATM machine, what do? You put in the card, you put in the code, you take your money, right? Simple process. Put in the card, put in the code, take your money, put in the card, put in the code. And after a while, I understand the mechanical process. I stopped doing. He said, why would you stop doing it? He said, do you realize what's going on behind the wall? I said, no. He said, the account's being debited. See, normal people are intellect over emotion. They think, they process, and they act. I'm exactly the opposite. I'm emotion over intellect. I act, process, and then think. Oops, 10th step. Oh, come on. We're the only people that burn bridges ahead of us. Right? If you're laughing, you're relating. It's not normal. Not normal. Now, I don't want to bash the therapeutic community, but going through treatment 28 times, eventually I started to speak a foreign language in treatment. You guys know the foreign language, right? It's called victimese. I don't understand how the drug bone connects to the jail bone. It's like I need a class for that. It's kind of like I met her in rehab. I can't believe she got loaded. I can always tell the people that haven't written any inventory, they don't think this is funny, right? I knew he was a crackhead. Can't believe he stole my iPhone. Hello? Met her at the strip club. Can't believe she cheated. No offense to the exotic dancers. Doesn't say it works if you twerk it, right? And eventually I had to look at how I make decisions based on self. I didn't understand that eventually this would beg for responsibility. That if I continued to play victim, I would never stay clean. Victims don't get clean. That eventually I had to be rid of those old ideas. It's like when they asked Michelangelo, how did you make the statue of David? He said, I never made the statue of David. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, and there he was. What if this process was really about finding those old ideas? This attitude that I can do whatever I want and not pay the consequences. Isn't that the lie? Once I put down the bag? The delusions that I live in? Because unless I understand what the problem is, the solution's not going to work. And what the problem is for me, and this is not true for everybody, but it's true for me. When I stop getting loaded, the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. See, I got a body that can't process narcotics, but more importantly, I have a mind that cannot process reality. Think about it, a body that can't use and a mind that has to. You don't think that's a dilemma? And I thought for years, because I get loaded, therefore my life's unmanageable. That's like looking at the tip of an iceberg and seeing the ruined marriage, broken home, financial destitution, the failing health, and thinking that's the problem. In fact, that's what treatment tells me the problem is. That's why I'm sitting in another treatment center in my nightgown with my ass hanging out, learning about my triggers. And I'm like, counselor, waking up's a trigger for me. I'm awake. And what I eventually see is that I go through the 12-step process, I find out the trigger's actually on the inside. You ever notice when an addict's not having a good day? You know when I'm not having a good day? When I'm not getting my way. Oh, please, we're all like 5-year-old kids here with old people's faces. Oh, you don't believe it? Cross one of us. I'll resent you for decades. And your grandkids. The problem with resentment in Latin is it means to refeel. It means I've taken an event from my past, I've attached emotion to it, and then I refeel it, I rethink it, I reenact it in every area of my life. My life is like Groundhog Day. I am attached to everything, and I am open to nothing. And what I'm trying to become is open to everything and attached to nothing. That is where the spiritual freedom is. The only prison where the key's inside. And unless I really understand the problem, the solution won't work. A lot of that problem is that omnipotence, which means the need to play God. The need to sort, compare, judge, and label. I have a severe emotional overreaction to 5 things. Abandonment, rejection, betrayal, disrespect, and authority. And they're all driven by fear, right? Fear of abandonment. Isn't that the relationship one? Right? Fear of betrayal. I got to go through her phone. Right? Oh, I've never done that, right? Fear of disrespect, Holmes. Yeah? More people get killed by disrespect than all of them, right? I'm chasing you 4 exits past my exit on the freeway, right? Fear of rejection. I'm never going to try anything new. A faulty relationship with God based on self-reliance. It tells me now I'm not getting loaded. All I need is a relationship, a house, a job, and a car, and my life will be okay. That's another lie. How can I plant corn and harvest potatoes? It seems so obvious, right? I'm planting selfishness and dishonesty and resentment and fear in every area of my life. And I want to harvest respect and love and harmony. It doesn't add up. Honor is a gift that a man or woman gives themselves. It has nothing to do with other people. One of the things my sponsor said, he said, what do you want from the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous? And I said, you know what? I grew up in Malibu. I want a yacht and a Learjet. And you know what he said to me? He said, if you work steps 4 through 9 and you consistently live in 10, 11, and 12, what you'll get, because I'm here to get something, I'm actually a taker, right? He says, what you'll get is a quiet mind and a loving heart. And I thought, what do I want that for? But if you're new, think about what the opposite of a quiet mind is, right? It's a mind that won't shut up. It's a mind that's up at 3 in the morning telling me I'm a loser, right? It might be telling you your significant other is with their ex while you're at this conference. You know? It's the one that's up 5 minutes before me every day. It's the one that's going to do the background check, right? And the opposite of a loving heart is a vindictive heart. It's a prejudiced heart. It's a racist heart. It's a divisive heart. And all of my life I've been crucified between 2 thieves, yesterday and tomorrow. And yesterday I have guilt, shame, and remorse. And tomorrow I have fear, anxiety, and worry. The product of the 12 steps, the eventuality of this spiritual exercise is I get a quiet mind. I become separated from the events that used to own me. Wherever there's hysterics, there's historics. Wherever I have an emotional response, I have history, and that is where I write inventory. That's how I get free. So I start to see the greater aspect of this problem. Our spirits are like a body of water. When they're perfectly still, they best reflect the heavens. I know how to get there with a balloon. But unless I can find that freedom through this process, I will never stay here. I know I got just a couple of minutes. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I would have killed him, right? If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed him. And then I come to Narcotics Anonymous, and you want me to pray to God? I didn't want God to find out where I was. Right? I'd become bankrupt in those 3 relationships. If you really look at the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous by design, they really remedy those 3 relationships. Steps 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. Very simple idea. 10, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. 12, through service, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, a selfish, self-centered addict like myself is not only easily able to control my desire for narcotics, but I'm able to live in harmony with God, self, and others. There was a great spiritual teacher. He was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? What did he say? Oh, love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. And if God scares you out of NA, don't worry about it. Dope man will scare you back in. So it's a little bit like purgatory, which means to be caught between 2 worlds. I can't live out there loaded anymore because it's too painful. And I can't be happy and clean because I'm resistant to spiritual change. So I'm stuck in purgatory. And all I ever knew was, you know what they told me, is all this time God had this amazing life right here. All I had to do was step into it. If you're new, step over to the winning side. Right here. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. That's the process. So one of the things that happened to me when I got out of that 28th treatment center is the guy that was running the detox said, why don't you come back to treatment next week and tell everybody in treatment how you stay clean a whole week, if you can make it. And for the next 8 years, I sat in 2 hours of bumper-to-bumper traffic from LAX to the West Valley to tell a bunch of strangers in detox that didn't care how I stayed clean a whole week. And I was tricked into service is what happened. There's a poem in Notre Dame. It says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul I could not free. I sought my brother, and I found all three. And that's why we talk about the therapeutic value of one addict working with another is without parallel. That is the Trinity. The steps bring me wisdom, the fellowship brings me power, and service brings me love. And you don't think that's a good trade for a bag of dope? Wisdom, power, and love? That's what we're giving away here. If this was a room full of dope dealers, you'd have every number in here. Right? One of the oldest stories, I'll close with this, in Narcotics Anonymous, about a little 5-year-old kid that wants to play with his dad, and the dad's like an accountant. He's trying to figure out a way to occupy this little boy. So the dad grabs a map. You know National Geographic, they have those big maps of the world. He gets this map of the world, and he rips it up into like 50 pieces. He gives it to his little boy. He gives his son some tape. And he says, what I want you to do, son, is I want you to put this map of the world back together, and when you're finished, we'll play. And he's thinking it's going to take this little boy an hour, 5 years old. He comes back in 2 minutes. He's got the whole map of the world taped back together. He's so happy to tell his dad he did it. And the dad's like, that's impossible. I'm like 50 years old. I couldn't do it. How'd you do it? And this little boy says, you know, Dad, on the back of the map of the world, there was a picture of a man. I just put the man back together, and the whole world fell into place. If you're new, that is the spiritual technology of Narcotics Anonymous. To rebuild the man or woman, 1 through 3 with God, 4 through 7 with self, through inventory, 8 and 9 with others, through amends. And then to maintain, develop, and grow those 3 relationships. Thank you guys so much.